Nicolas Renard was quickly getting dressed while practicing a mournful expression in front of the mirror. Soon he would be told that the king was dead and that he was now heir to the throne, and he needed to look sufficiently grief-stricken. It had to be convincing. Nothing could raise even the slightest suspicion that the king's death had been accidental. After all, it had cost him a fortune to make it look that way. He had paid the ship's captain to set the king's vessel ablaze and make sure he had no way to escape. On the open sea, so early in spring, the king wouldn't have stood a chance of surviving in the cold water. Nicholas was certain that while he was rehearsing his funeral speech, the king's body was already resting at the bottom of the sea. His ambitions were as deep as the ocean, and he was insatiable in his thirst for power. Just a few years ago, he had graduated as the top student from the university, yet even being one of the wealthiest men on the island wasn't enough for him. He wanted to be somebody. A born leader and organizer, he had thousands of ideas about how to rule Le Pays des Cygnes. 2 years earlier his father had died, and for a while Nicholas was content with inheriting his estate and taking care of his 2 younger sisters. But now he wanted more. He believed that power would satisfy the hunger and emptiness he still grappled with inside. One day, he would fulfill all his desires and finally be content. His desires were never modest. He wanted to be king. Moreover, he hoped that power would somehow resolve the mess he had been struggling with for weeks. He was engaged to the daughter of a wealthy count, but he had also gotten Nina, the daughter of a local landowner, pregnant. Nina was beautiful and clever, and for a moment he had succumbed to her charm, but otherwise she was a nobody. The worst part was that she naively expected him to marry her, a count and future king. She and her father were persistent, and of course they made sure his fiancée found out immediately. His engagement was called off. But Nicholas wasn't troubled by that now. He would deal with this ordinary girl somehow, and once he was king, he could take his pick despite the scandal. Young ladies would fall at his feet, and even if everyone on the island knew he had an illegitimate child somewhere, they wouldn't care. He knew that power and wealth would make them overlook any flaws. Not that Nicholas had any physical ones. He was tall and handsome, with an unruly mop of thick dark hair and a distinctive sense of humor. His only flaw was his character. Otherwise, everything he touched turned to gold. Along with his natural gifts, he had a photographic memory and a talent for languages. He had studied in England for a year and spoke English fluently, spoke decent Dutch, and during short stays in Greece and Italy, he had picked up both languages, excelling even more in their ancient forms. He could effortlessly read texts in Koine Greek and Latin. Luck was on his side in other ways too. The king's wife, Annabelle, a princess of the royal house of Le Pays des Cygnes, whom Nicholas was on his way to see, had borne King David 4 daughters in their 11 years of marriage. In Le Pays des Cygnes, where succession favored male heirs, the absence of a son left the throne open to the next man in the royal line. As Annabelle's relative, Nicholas believed himself the rightful successor, provided no son appeared. As he entered the king's study, his thoughts were already fixed on his future coronation. Annabelle looked distraught, hardly surprising. She gestured for him to sit. "The royal ship sank this morning," she said in a strained voice, without any further introduction. "And the crew was unable to save my husband. Do you know what this means to you?" "I'm truly very sorry, madam," Nicholas said, as sorrowfully as he could manage. "I assume it means the heavy burden of ruling will fall on my shoulders. But is it really certain? You know, hope dies last. I'd be happy to offer my own ship and set out to search for the king. Perhaps there's still a chance he survived. What exactly happened?" "Did you rehearse that at home in front of a mirror?" Annabelle asked, frowning. "That talk about the heavy burden of ruling falling on your shoulders?" "Of course not, madam," Nicholas replied, looking at her with feigned confusion. "How could I have known something like that?" "I don't know, Annabelle shrugged. Maybe because you paid the captain to sink the ship so the king couldn't reach a lifeboat? Now Nicholas didn't have to fake his bewildered expression. He looked at her in shock. "Excuse me?" was all he could muster. "You vile, treacherous, greedy wretch," Annabelle hissed furiously. "I love that man. I'm pregnant with his 5th child. And I could have lost him just because someone like you doesn't have a shred of conscience. How could you even think of something like that? What kind of sick mind does it take?" Annabelle didn't finish her tirade. At that moment, the slightly ajar door leading from the study to the king's private bathroom swung wide open, and King David stepped into the room. "That's enough, my love," he said, calming his wife. Nicholas looked at the king with genuine horror on his face. "You look like you've seen a ghost," the king said coldly. "But I assure you, I'm alive and well, and I made it home safely, despite everything you tried to arrange. We staged this little show, hoping to catch some sign of regret, a hint of remorse, but it's clear you feel none. I'm still too furious to deal with you now. The guards will take you away. We'll talk when I'm ready. At this moment, I truly don't know what to do with you." Nicholas lowered his head, unable to utter a single word. King David opened the door, and the guards, already waiting, escorted the young count away to prison.